I'll be reading from Exodus chapter 20, verses 1 to 22. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. Don't make for yourself an image in the form of anything in heaven above, or on the earth beneath, or in the waters below. Don't bow down to them or worship them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for the sins of the parents to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing love to 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my commandments. Don't misuse the name of the Lord your God, for the Lord will not hold anyone guiltless who misuses his name. Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labour and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it, don't do any work, neither you, nor your son, nor your daughter, nor your male or female servant, nor your young animals, nor any foreigner residing in your towns. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that's in them, but he rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. Honour your father and your mother, so that you may live long in the land the Lord your God has given you. Don't murder. Don't commit adultery. Don't steal. And don't give false testimony against your neighbour. Don't covet your neighbour's house. Don't covet your neighbour's wife, or his male or female servant, his ox, his donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbour. When the people saw the thunder and lightning, and heard the trumpet, and saw the mountain in smoke, they trembled with fear. They stayed at a distance and said to Moses, "Speak to us yourself, and we will listen, but don't have God speak to us, or we will die." Moses said to the people, "Don't be afraid. God has come to test you, so that the fear of God will be with you and keep you from sinning." The people remained at a distance while Moses approached the thick darkness where God was.
Matthew chapter 5, and we're going to be looking at the first 16 verses. Now when he saw the crowds, he went up on a mountainside and sat down. His disciples came to him, and he began to teach them by saying, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called sons of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven. For in the same way that they persecuted the prophets who were before you. You are the salt of the earth, but if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything else except to be thrown out and trampled by men. You are the light of the world. A city on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before men, that they may see your good deeds and praise your Father in heaven. This is the word of the Lord.
What might it look like to be blessed by God? What does a person who's blessed by God look like? Someone who's favoured by God. A few years ago, a trend started on social media that when you were bragging about your achievements, or when you were sharing all the good things that were going on in your life, you'd put it on Facebook or Twitter, and then you'd put a little hashtag blessed, just to be humble about it. So, you'd see a photo of someone lying on a beach, and they'd say, just relaxing in Fiji for a week, hashtag blessed. Or someone would post, I have 3 wonderful children, with a picture of their perfect teeth, all top of their class, hashtag blessed. What does someone look like when they're blessed by God? Jessica Bennett writes in 2014 in the New York Times, here are a few of the ways that God has touched my social network over the past few months. He helped a friend get accepted into graduate school. She was blessed to be there. He made it possible for a yoga instructor's Caribbean spa retreat. She wrote blessed to be teaching in paradise. He helped a new mum outfit her infant in a tiny designer frock. A year of patiently waiting and it finally fits, feeling blessed. He graced a colleague with at least 57 Facebook wall postings about her birthday. Here's what it said. So blessed for all the love, she wrote to approximately 900 of her closest friends. Jessica keeps writing, God has in fact recently blessed my network with dazzling job promotions, coveted speaking gigs, the most wonderful fiancés ever, front row seats at Fashion Week, and the blessings aren't just limited to the little people either. He blessed Macklemore with a wardrobe designer, and Jamie Lynn Spears with an engagement ring. Hashtag blessed, hashtag blessed, hashtag blessed, she wrote on Twitter. He's been known to bless Kanye West and Kim Kardashian with exotic getaways and expensive bottles of champagne overlooking sunsets of biblical proportion, of course. What does it look like for someone to be blessed by God? Now, in Jesus' time, they didn't have Facebook or Twitter. But there were people thinking about what does someone look like when they're blessed by God? And so people kind of wrote lists of what does it look like? How do you become blessed by God? Here's one from a couple of hundred years before Jesus, from Sirach. Some of the things he says you can point out someone who's blessed by God. A man who can rejoice in his children. Hashtag blessed. A man who sees the downfall of his foes. Hashtag blessed. A man who lives with a sensible wife. Hashtag blessed. A man who has not served an inferior. I love this one. Hashtag blessed. Your boss is not an idiot. The one who finds a friend is blessed. The one who speaks to attentive listeners. The man who finds wisdom, the one who fears the Lord. All these people are blessed. The Bible's full of talk about blessing, about God blessing his people. The famous one, or one of the famous ones, is in Deuteronomy. As God's people are about to enter into the promised land, Moses, who had gone up the mountain to receive the 10 Commandments, which we read this morning, again recommends that as they go into the promised land, the people go up onto a mountain and pronounce God's blessings for obedience and his curse for disobedience. This is what Moses says in Deuteronomy 28. All these blessings will overtake you if you shall obey the voice of the Lord your God. Blessed shall you be in the city and blessed in the field. Blessed shall be the fruit of your womb and the fruit of your ground and the fruit of your cattle, the increase of your herds and the young of your flock. Blessed shall be your basket and kneading bowl. Blessed shall you be when you come in and when you go out. It's this picture saying you're about to enter the promised land. If you live God's way, things will go really well for you. You will be the head and not the tail. He will send his rain. There will be an abundance. You may even sit on a biblical proportioned sunset with an expensive bottle of champagne. You will be blessed. You will be blessed if you obey. Of course, we know the history of what happened with Israel, don't we? Did they obey? No, they did not. And so they found the curses coming on them, and eventually they're kicked out of the land into exile. Well, Jesus comes and he brings a completely different kind of blessing. a completely different kind of blessing to people. He's come, and in chapter 4, we read just last week at the beginning of his ministry, he comes to people and says, repent because the kingdom of heaven is near. Jesus is saying the time that the prophets spoke of when there would be a new exodus, a return from the exile, the kingdom of God is going to come, and God is going to come and comfort his people, and they will enter into their inheritance, and there'll be righteousness and justice and mercy, that people will see God, that they'll be adopted as his children. Jesus says that's near, and so repent, turn around. And what we have in these blessings, if you've closed your Bibles like I did, open them up to chapter 5. What we have in these blessings are Jesus describing the kind of people who are ready for that kingdom that is near and coming. What kind of people are ready for God's kingdom? That is, what kind of people have repented? Jesus says, come and follow me into that kingdom. Well, what kind of people are ready for that kingdom to come? Just as Moses went up the mountain and brought the law to God's people, so Jesus sees the crowds. He goes up onto the mountainside, gathers his disciples, and the crowds are there too. He takes a deep breath and he pronounces these blessings. What kind of people are kingdom ready? We're going to take a look at these blessings today, and we're going to split them into 3 groups of 3. So in the first 3, we're going to see that humbled people and humble people are ready for the kingdom. In the second 3, we're going to see that those who long for justice and live it out are ready for the kingdom. And in the last 3, we're going to look at those who pursue peace are ready for the kingdom to come. So let's take a look at these blessings. The first one. Jesus doesn't point to those who live a life of abundance and say they are blessed. Jesus doesn't point to the wealthy. He doesn't point to the rich. Instead, in verse 3, Jesus says, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Now, people tend to take what Jesus is saying here in a couple of different ways. One is to say Jesus is simply pointing at those who are economically poor. So in Luke, when Luke records this, he has just Jesus saying, blessed are the poor. And the word is for those who are economically have not much or nothing. It's never used in any other way. It's for the poor. Others take what Matthew says here, blessed are the poor in spirit, and say, oh, well, it's actually talking about a spiritual poverty. That is, knowing that we are spiritually poor before God. So economic, or is this a spiritual issue? I actually think we do best when we put them together. Jesus is pointing at those who really don't have much at all, and because they don't have much at all, it's taught them to trust in God. That is, he's talking about the spirituality of the poor who trust in God even when they've got nothing. Those who have learnt to trust God for their daily bread because they really are trusting God for their daily bread. If you're a person who, you're never going to get to relax on the beach in Fiji, you're never going to post that photo of your perfect children with their perfect teeth and perfect marks in class. There'll be no college education for them. You don't have a cent to your name. You're wondering how the bills are going to get paid. You've spent the last few days saying, God, you've got to get me through this because I don't have air conditioning. If you've got not much, and yet you trust in God to look after you, Jesus says, you are blessed. You are blessed. Because when the kingdom comes, you will be royalty in that kingdom forever. If you've got nothing now and you trust in God now, when the kingdom comes, you will be royalty in that kingdom forever. Now, I'll give you a heads up. I'm going to ask you guys to write some tweets with the hashtag blessed for these at the end of the section. So you can start thinking, what might someone who is poor in spirit write about their circumstances now and put blessed at the end? It's a pretty strange thing for Jesus to say, isn't it? Blessed are those who are poor, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. But the second one is almost weirder. Jesus says, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are those who grieve. Blessed are the depressed," says Jesus. If you're a person who looks at the state of the world and you are grieved by it, if you are someone who mourns, who has suffered loss, who suffers under the curse of death and decay. Paul will put it in Romans, if you groan along with all the creation, waiting for this creation to be liberated from decay. If you look at yourself and your own role in this messed up world and you mourn at the way you are, Jesus says, you are blessed. Not the happy people, not the optimistic people, not the ones who life seems to have given comfort and an easy road. Jesus says those who mourn now are blessed, because when the kingdom comes, they will be comforted by God. They will be comforted by God. Jesus is picking up the words of Isaiah in Isaiah 61, that when the kingdom comes, those who mourn will be comforted. So have a think. What might someone who is mourning and grieving now write in their Facebook post and then chuck a hashtag blessed on? Blessed are the poor, the lowly. Blessed are those who mourn now. Jesus says, blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Meek, the powerless, the voiceless. It's the word here for meek is the word for those who are low in status and the kind of attitude that they have to have towards the powerful. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's those who aren't fighting back when people take what is theirs. The meek, the powerless, the lowly. Jesus says if you're like that, you are blessed because you will inherit the land. Now, as we look through history, it's not the meek who've taken the land, is it? Is it? It's not the meek who've taken our land. It's those who've turned up with a musket. It's not the meek who've taken the inheritance of the land. It's those who will murder to take it. Or if we look around today, it's not the meek and the small and the lowly who get the inheritance of the land. It's those who will take the biggest mortgage. It's not the meek or the lowly who think they own the dirt, but those who can get a mining license, who can pull some coal out of the ground and hold it before you. But Jesus says the meek will inherit the earth. When the kingdom comes, God will give the land back. God will give the land to the meek, to the lowly, to the humble. These are strange blessings, aren't they? They first three. What a reversal from what we would expect. Who is it that is blessed? The poor, the grieving, and the lonely. The lowly. Probably lonely too. So what I'd like you to do now is grab your bulletin. There should be some pens and pencils around. I want you to write some tweets of the poor, the mourning, and the meek, and then I want you to put a hashtag blessed on the end of it. So here's the ones that I prepared earlier. I haven't got a cent to my name, and God, you'd better provide the next meal for me because I don't know where it's coming from. Hashtag blessed. Or the world seems so dark. I have suffered so much loss, so much injustice. Hashtag blessed. Or I couldn't really think of one for the meek. I put don't mind me, I won't push back. Hashtag blessed. So I want you to write some tweets for the poor in spirit, for those who mourn. I hope you've got one, maybe two. I'm going to keep going. So Jesus says, blessed are the humble, those who've been humbled, those who are lowly. In this second three, he speaks of those who long for God's justice. It says, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are those who look around and know that things aren't right, whose lips are parched, longing for God to set this world right. Not just weeping about how bad it is, but longing for God to come in his righteousness and make all things new. Who long for God in his righteousness to act. But who not just look at the world and its problems, the world and its wickedness, and long for God to set its right, but who look at themselves. Who look at themselves and know that they are not righteous in the way that God would have them to be. That they are not living in a right way before God, and who hunger and who long to be righteous. Who long for God to make us right. Jesus doesn't say, blessed are those who know they're righteous. He doesn't say, blessed are those who think they're righteous. He says, blessed are those who hunger and who thirst for righteousness. Are your eyes itchy, longing for things to be right? Is your mouth dry and parched, longing for God to bring justice? Does your stomach churn and cramp up, wishing for God to make you right, to make you right? Well, Jesus says, if that's the case, then you are blessed, because when the kingdom comes, you will be filled. When the kingdom comes, justice will roll like a river. Righteousness like a mighty stream. And you'll stand under the waterfall of that stream, and the water will pour down on your parched lips, and you will be soaked, and your belly will fill up with the justice and the righteousness of God. For those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, when the kingdom comes, they will be filled. Jesus says in verse 7, blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Later on, Jesus will speak of forgiving our enemies, of loving our enemies, of praying for those who persecute us, for showing mercy to people who even do the wrong thing against us. And that's part of what Jesus is speaking of when he speaks of those who are blessed, who actually forgive those who are against them. But it's also concrete acts of mercy. If you're the kind of person who actively goes looking for the poor, who actively goes looking for those who mourn, who actively goes looking for the meek, that you might use your resources to help those who are in need, to show mercy to those who are in need. If you're the kind of person who goes looking to show love to the needy, Jesus says God will come and will come looking for you to show love and compassion to you. Who is it that's ready for the kingdom to come? It's those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. It's those who are merciful to others. And then in verse 8, Jesus says, blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. That is, those people who do these things, who do these acts of mercy, not so that others will see them and say, aren't they lovely people, but because they genuinely actually love people. Those who hunger and thirst for justice and righteousness, not so that they can put a grumpy post on Facebook, but because they actually love righteousness, because they actually love God and love their neighbour. They have pure hearts. Their lives are the same in public and in private when the door is closed. Jesus says of these people, they will see God. You remember the Israelites at the mountain didn't even want to hear God. Well, those who are pure in heart, who love God and love their neighbours, will have a better experience than the Israelites. In fact, they will have a better experience than the priests who purified themselves to serve in the temple. They didn't see God, did they? Did they? The pure in heart will have a better experience even of the high priest who purified himself to enter into the Holy of Holies and meet with God. Did he see God? He saw the cloud. He saw the emptiness between the cherubim in the temple. He didn't see God. Those who are pure in heart will see God. They are those who are kingdom ready. So what kind of people are ready for the kingdom in the second? It's those who hunger for righteousness, who are merciful for others, and who are pure in heart. Now have a think of people who are like that you know. And I want you to have a think, what kind of tweet would they write? What kind of tweet would they write? And put hashtag blessed on the end. And as you do, I want to draw your attention to something in these Beatitudes, which you may not have noticed. Who is it that's entered the kingdom? Who's entered the kingdom now? Who is it that God has said, this is the one I am pleased with? Here's my son, of whom I am well pleased. Who's entered the kingdom? Who has entered into that blessed state? See, if I was in Sunday school, they would have yelled it out by now. Who is it? It's Jesus, isn't it? Jesus comes and tells us, who is it that's kingdom ready? Who's he talking about? He's talking about himself. Jesus is describing his followers, but firstly he's speaking of himself in these. And so Jesus, let's look through them. Blessed are the meek. Later on in Matthew, Jesus will say, come to me, all you who labour and are heavy laden. I am gentle. It's actually the word for I am gentle and humble of heart. Jesus is meek. Jesus weeps over the state of the world. He weeps for the crowds. He weeps at the death of Lazarus. He weeps for Jerusalem, who has rejected God. He weeps for them. Jesus has lived in poverty. You know, we saw him 40 days in the desert waiting on God to feed him. He has lived that poverty, trusting in God for his daily bread. And it's even more clear in this second section. Where is it that we see justice, mercy, and purity meet? It's in Jesus, isn't it? As Jesus hangs on the cross, there we see God's justice and righteousness and God's mercy meeting together. Here is the one who is prepared to enter into the kingdom. And so as we look at these Beatitudes, they not only tell us how to follow him, as he says, come follow me. These prepare us for the kingdom because they prepare us to recognize Jesus as the one who will enter into God's kingdom as God's king. All right. Get to it with your Twitters for this second section. Those who hunger for God's righteousness. Those who are merciful. Those who are pure in heart. I'll give you some of my examples. What do I put for those ones? Lord, I know I'm not right with you, but I want you to make me right with you. Hashtag blessed. Lord, there's so much need around me. Let me fill it. Hashtag blessed. Lord, I've kept myself pure. I don't know why I made all these prayers, but I did. Hashtag blessed. You don't have to make them a prayer to God. So who is it that's kingdom ready? The humble, those who long for God's justice, who live out his justice and mercy. And in the last, those who are peacemakers. We've seen that Jesus kind of embodies these blessings, but in this last three, we're explicitly told it's those who follow Jesus who are blessed. Blessed are you when people insult you and say all kinds of evil against you because of me, said Jesus. In this last section, we see those who are kingdom ready, those who are blessed because they're kingdom ready, are those who will follow Jesus' way into the kingdom. Into the kingdom. These last three are quite explicit about that. It's not simply those who follow a kingdom agenda. It's those who will follow Jesus' kingdom agenda. And that's important as we look at the first of them in verse 9. Jesus says, blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called sons of God. Because you see, in Jesus' time, there were other people who looked forward to God's kingdom. There were other people who were oppressed and who were put low, especially by the Romans, who looked forward to God's kingdom coming. There were other people concerned with purity, with obeying God, and with the coming of God's kingdom, who thought they could force God's hand and bring God's kingdom about through violence. Zealots who thought they could bring God's kingdom about by violent resistance against the Romans, by violent resistance even against their own people who they thought weren't pure enough, dividing the people into those who are pure and who are not pure, making divisions among the people, divisions among the nations, and bringing God's kingdom about through violence. And Jesus says the exact opposite. His way of the kingdom is not a way of violence, but a way of peace. Jesus comes to bring God's kingdom, making peace between God and people, but also bringing peace between people and other people. And so Jesus later in the sermon will say, pray for those who persecute you. If someone comes and slaps you on the cheek, offer them the other cheek. Jesus comes and brings an ethic of non-retaliation, even against evil. And he lives it out all the way to the end, all the way to his death on the cross. Jesus does not raise an army to bring in God's kingdom. And so to those he says, come follow me, he says, blessed are the peacemakers. That is, those who live in peace with others. And not only that, those who attempt to bring warring parties to peace as well, to bring peace between others too. And I know some of you are these kind of people. The kind of people who love peace more than conflict, who love harmony more than an argument. And I know for some of you, it's really hard. And it's really tiring. And it's really draining. And at times, it seems like it doesn't work. You know, have you ever had the situation where maybe it's people in your family or others are warring with each other and you're just trying to make peace and both of them end up turning against you? Because both of them say, you're not on my side, so you're my enemy. Peacemaking doesn't seem to work often, does it? On a personal level, often on an international level, trying to make peace doesn't seem to work. Well, does Jesus say, blessed are the peacemakers because it will work? Is that what he says? It's not, is it? He said, blessed are the peacemakers because they will be called sons of God. That is, they will be like God. They will be like Jesus. How does Jesus' peacemaking work out for him? What does he get? He gets killed, doesn't he? He manages to unite the Herodians and the Pharisees who hated each other for ages, and they get together to kill him. To kill him. And Jesus says, pick up your cross and come follow me. Come follow me. Be peacemakers and you will be blessed. Or in verse 10, blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Following Jesus doesn't necessarily work in this world, whether it's making peace or living lives where we're trusting in God for our daily bread, or opening our eyes to the difficulties of this world instead of distracting ourselves with comforts and technology or whatever it is, and mourning for those bad things. It doesn't necessarily work in this world. In this world, if you're following it just like Jesus, you may very well end up persecuted because of righteousness. You may very well end up persecuted and slandered, and people have awful things to say and do against you because you name the name of Jesus and you follow in the way of his kingdom. And Jesus says when that happens, you are blessed. You know, throughout the New Testament, the disciples as they write will say, rejoice in your sufferings, because it means if you share in the sufferings of Jesus, you will share in his glory in the kingdom. If you're suffering and being slandered and persecuted now, it's a pretty good sign you're with Jesus, isn't it? And how does that work out for Jesus? What happens for him? He dies, but he's raised from the dead. He enters into God's kingdom as the king of that kingdom. and you will share in his reward. Jesus says, great is your reward in heaven. That's the way they treated the prophets before. That's the way they're going to treat the King, the Son of God. And if they're treating you that way, you will share in that reward. All right, I'm going to give you a quick minute, if such things exist, to write some hashtags of those who are trying to make peace and yet are being persecuted, and put hashtag blessed at the end. So here's some of mine. You all hate me because I refuse to take sides. Hashtag blessed. You accused me of blasphemy. You've taken away my family. And now you are going to kill me for the name of Jesus. Hashtag blessed. Well, Jesus lived this blessed life of being poor, of mourning, of being meek, of righteousness and mercy and purity and peace and persecution. He lived it. He died it. He was vindicated by God, raised and made king of the kingdom. And we wait for that kingdom to be fully revealed. And so as the community of people who follow Jesus, that's what we're going to be like too. Jesus is describing the kingdom people. Now, it doesn't mean we're going to be all of these things individually. We won't all be poor. We won't always be mourning. But as God's people, these are the kind of people that God's people are going to be like until that kingdom is fully revealed. They're not commands in the sense that we should, commanded to go and be poor or commanded to always mourn. They're just Jesus noticing what the kind of people who are ready to recognize him as the blessed one, as the king, are like. And so take a look at your tweets. Take a look at what you've written in your tweets. Is that your vision of the blessed life? Is that the shape of a life blessed by God in the way that you think it? Are you that kind of person? Ready for God's kingdom to come. We need to listen to Jesus' words so that we'd recognize Jesus as the blessed one, but so that we'd also live a blessed life. We need these Beatitudes to shape who we admire, who we aspire to be like. Do we admire the Kanye West and Kim Kardashians of this world? I hope you don't. His music's terrible. But do we admire and aspire to be like those who have wealth and comfort? Or do we aspire to be like those who have nothing and yet trust in God? Trust in God for their daily bread. Do we admire and aspire and listen to those who are powerful, who are happy, who seem to be doing well in this world, who grab the land for themselves, who promise us security? Or do we admire those who are meek, who are lowly, who show mercy to the meek and lowly, who are willing to be vulnerable and persecuted on God's behalf? Do we admire and aspire to be those who distract themselves with comfort, who close their eyes and their hearts to the wickedness of this world and to the wickedness within them? Or do we admire and aspire to be like those who mourn over this world and who long for God to set them right? Look at your tweets. If it's you, I want to say you are blessed. Jesus wants to say you are blessed because you are ready for the kingdom. You're ready for his kingdom to be revealed. And so may God bless you. May he keep you. It's kind of dangerous things when we've seen what the blessed life is. But may you live a blessed life, ready to enter into Jesus' eternal kingdom. Amen.